During a family lunch, my daughter-in-law shouted, "You should be ashamed to depend on us." The shrew didn't know I had been paying the house rent for the last 6 months. When she tried to renew the lease, she found out that. Subscribe to the channel for more stories like this, and comment the city you're watching from. My name is Bonnie, and at 65 years old, I thought I'd experienced every kind of heartbreak a mother could endure. I was wrong. The Sunday family lunch started like any other. I'd arrived at Marcus and Natalie's house with my homemade apple pie, the same recipe I'd been making for 30 years. The same recipe Marcus used to beg me to make when he was 7, standing on a kitchen stool beside me, flour dusting his little hands. I rang the doorbell and waited, smoothing down my best blouse. Through the window, I could see them moving around the dining room, setting the table with the expensive china set I'd given them for their wedding 5 years ago. Natalie answered the door with her usual forced smile. "Oh, Bonnie, you're here." Her tone made it sound like I was an unexpected guest rather than family. "Hello, dear. I brought dessert." I held up the pie, hoping to see some warmth in her eyes. She took it without a word, her perfectly manicured nails clicking against the pie dish. Everything about Natalie was perfect. Her blonde hairstyle just so. Her designer dress that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. Her makeup applied with precision. But there was something cold behind those blue eyes that always made me feel unwelcome in my own son's home. Marcus appeared behind her, and my heart lifted slightly. My boy. Though at 38, he'd long stopped being a boy. Still had the same kind eyes he'd inherited from his father. "Hey, Mom." He kissed my cheek, and I caught the familiar scent of his aftershave mixed with something else, stress, maybe exhaustion. The dining room was pristine as always. Natalie insisted on everything being magazine perfect. I'd learned early in their marriage not to touch anything without permission. The table was set for 4, which meant Natalie's sister Chelsea was joining us again. I settled into my usual chair, the one closest to the kitchen so I could help clear plates, though Natalie rarely let me. Chelsea arrived 20 minutes later, full of dramatic stories about her latest dating adventures. She had the same sharp features as Natalie, the same way of looking at people like they were slightly beneath her. She worked in marketing for some tech company and never let anyone forget it. "Bonnie." Chelsea air-kissed me, her perfume overwhelming. "Still living in that little apartment? When are you going to upgrade?" I forced a smile. "It suits me just fine." "Chelsea just bought a condo downtown," Natalie chimed in, her voice bright with pride. 2 bedrooms, hardwood floors, granite countertops. "That's wonderful," I said, meaning it. I'd raised Marcus to be happy for others' successes, even when they seemed designed to make you feel small. The conversation flowed around me like water around a stone. They talked about vacation plans to Europe, about Natalie's promotion at her interior design firm, about Marcus's latest project at the architectural company where he worked. I listened, nodding at appropriate moments, asking questions that showed I cared. I didn't mention that I'd been surviving on canned soup and crackers for the past 3 weeks. I didn't mention that I'd sold my mother's jewelry to help pay their rent 6 months ago when Marcus came to me, shame written across his face, explaining about the temporary cash flow problem. The attack came during dessert. I just complimented Natalie on the roast beef when she set down her fork with deliberate precision. The sound echoed in the suddenly quiet room. "You know what, Bonnie?" Her voice was sweet, but there was poison underneath. "I think it's time we talked about something." My stomach clenched. I knew that tone. Chelsea and I were discussing this earlier. We're both successful women who support ourselves. We don't understand how someone your age can be so comfortable, depending on other people. The words hit me like a physical blow. I felt my cheeks burn with shame, even though I'd done nothing wrong. "Natalie," Marcus started, but she held up a hand. "No, Marcus. This needs to be said. Your mother is 65 years old. She should have planned better for retirement. Instead, she comes here every few months with some story about needing help with bills or car repairs." Her voice grew louder, more confident. "Honestly, you should be ashamed of yourself depending on your son like this. Most parents want to leave something for their children, not drain them dry." Chelsea nodded vigorously. "It's emotional manipulation, really. Making Marcus feel guilty so he'll keep supporting you." I sat frozen, my half-eaten slice of apple pie turning to dust in my mouth. The room spun slightly, and I gripped the edge of the table to steady myself. "That's enough," Marcus said, his voice tight. "Is it though?" Natalie's eyes glittered with a cruelty I'd never seen so openly displayed. "When was the last time your mother offered to pay for dinner when we went out? When has she ever bought groceries for this house? She just takes and takes." My throat closed up completely. I wanted to defend myself, to tell them about the 6 months of rent I'd quietly paid when Marcus lost his previous job. About the insurance payments I'd covered when Natalie's car was in an accident. About the countless times I'd slipped Marcus money for groceries that I knew went to keeping their heads above water. But I couldn't say any of it. Marcus had begged me to keep it secret, ashamed that his wife didn't know about their financial struggles. He'd been so worried about disappointing her, about her seeing him as a failure. "You should be building us up, not holding us back," Natalie continued, her voice rising. "Successful families support each other upward, not downward." I finally found my voice, though it came out as barely a whisper. "I never meant to be a burden." "Well, you are." The words came out sharp and final. "And it needs to stop." The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear the grandfather clock in the hallway ticking, marking each agonizing second. Marcus stared at his plate, his jaw working like he was chewing words he couldn't swallow. I stood up slowly, my legs shaking. "I should go." "Bonnie, wait." Marcus started to rise, but Natalie's hand on his arm stopped him. "Let her go, Marcus. Maybe some time alone will help her think about how to be more independent." I walked to the front door on unsteady legs, my vision blurred with unshed tears. My purse felt impossibly heavy as I fumbled for my car keys. Behind me, I could hear Natalie's voice, lower now but still carrying. "I know that was hard to hear, but someone had to say it. Your mother needs to learn that she can't coast through life expecting other people to take care of her." I closed the door softly behind me, not wanting to give them the satisfaction of a dramatic exit. The autumn air was crisp against my burning cheeks as I walked to my 12-year-old Honda, the car I'd been driving since Marcus graduated college. As I sat in the driver's seat, hands trembling as I tried to start the engine, one thought kept echoing in my mind. If only they knew the truth. If only they knew who had really been taking care of whom. The irony would have been funny if it hadn't hurt so much. Tomorrow Marcus would try to renew their lease, and everything would come crashing down around them. Because what my precious daughter-in-law didn't know was that for the past 6 months, while she'd been calling me a burden and a leech, I'd been the one keeping the roof over their heads. The engine finally turned over, and I drove home through tears I could no longer hold back, wondering how love could hurt this much and whether my son would ever forgive me for what he was about to discover. 3 days passed in silence. 3 days of me jumping every time my phone rang, expecting Marcus to call with questions I wasn't ready to answer. 3 days of replaying Natalie's cruel words until they wore grooves in my mind like a broken record. I was sorting through old photographs in my small living room, trying to distract myself with happier memories, when my phone finally buzzed. Marcus's name appeared on the screen, and my heart hammered against my ribs. "Hi, sweetheart," I answered, trying to keep my voice steady. "Mom." His voice sounded strange, tight and confused. "I need to ask you something. And I need you to be completely honest with me." I set down the photo I'd been holding Marcus at age 10, grinning gap-toothed at his baseball game. "Of course. I went to renew our lease today. Mr. Peterson wasn't there, but his son Jake was handling things." Marcus paused, and I could hear papers rustling in the background. "Jake told me something that doesn't make sense." My mouth went dry. "What did he tell you?" "He said the house doesn't belong to his father anymore. He said it was sold 8 months ago to someone named Margaret Thompson." Another pause. "Mom, Margaret Thompson is your middle name." The photograph slipped from my fingers, floating to the floor like a fallen leaf. I'd known this moment would come eventually, but I wasn't prepared for how it would feel, like standing naked in a snowstorm. "Mom? Are you there?" "I'm here." My voice came out strangled. "Did you buy our house?" The question hung between us like a sword. I could lie. I could make up some story about coincidence about someone else with the same name. But I was 65 years old and tired of carrying secrets that bent my back with their weight. "Yes," I whispered. The silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. Then Marcus's voice came back, raw with emotion. "Why?" I closed my eyes, remembering that awful day 8 months ago when he'd shown up at my apartment, his face gray with panic. Natalie didn't know they were 3 months behind on rent. She didn't know that Marcus had been laid off from his previous job and had burned through their savings trying to keep up appearances. She didn't know that they had 1 week before eviction. "You were going to lose it," I said simply. "You came to me desperate, Marcus. You said you just needed time to get back on your feet. So you bought the entire house?" "I bought it and arranged for Jake Peterson to manage it. I thought if I owned it, I could give you time without the pressure of dealing with a landlord who might not be understanding." The words tumbled out faster now, a dam finally breaking. "I've been paying your rent through the management company. 6 months of payments, just like you thought you were making to Mr. Peterson." "Jesus Christ, Mom." His voice cracked. "How did you even afford this?" That was the question I'd been dreading. "I took out a reverse mortgage on my condo, the one your father left me." "You mortgaged Dad's place?" "Mom, that was supposed to be yours forever. It was just sitting there, worth more than I'll ever need. And you're my son, Marcus. You're all I have left of your father." My throat tightened with unshed tears. I couldn't watch you lose everything when I had the means to help. Another long silence. When Marcus spoke again, his voice was thick with guilt and something else, anger maybe. "Why didn't you tell me? All these months I thought I was paying rent. I've been so proud that we were managing on our own. Because you asked me not to tell Natalie about the financial trouble. You said she'd lose respect for you if she knew how bad things had gotten. So I figured this way you could both keep your dignity while you got back on your feet." I heard him take a shaky breath. "She doesn't know about any of it. She thinks we've been current on rent this whole time." I know. The irony wasn't lost on me. While Natalie had been calling me a burden and a leech, I'd been secretly saving their marriage by removing the financial stress that might have destroyed it. "Mom, I don't know what to say. This is huge. You basically gave up your security for us." "I'd do it again," I said, and meant it. "That's what mothers do." "But Natalie—" "Oh God, what Natalie said to you on Sunday." His voice turned hollow with realization. "She accused you of being dependent on us, while you were literally paying our bills." I'd replayed that scene so many times it had worn a permanent groove in my memory. The cruel satisfaction in her eyes as she'd called me a burden. The way she'd dismissed my worth as a human being with such casual cruelty. "She didn't know," I said, though the words tasted bitter. "That's not an excuse for what she said. The things she called you." Marcus's voice hardened. "I should have defended you. I should have shut her down immediately. You were protecting your marriage." "I understand." "No, you don't understand." His voice rose with sudden intensity. "There's more, Mom. Jake told me something else when I was there today." My heart skipped. "What?" "He said when you bought the house you could have just purchased it outright. You had enough from the reverse mortgage. But instead, you structured it as a lease-to-own agreement with a provision that if we ever wanted to buy it from you, we could do so at the original purchase price, not current market value." I'd hoped he wouldn't find out about that part. The housing market's been going up. I wanted to make sure you had options. "Mom, do you know what this house is worth now compared to 8 months ago?" I did know. I'd been watching the market, seeing similar homes in their neighborhood selling for significantly more than what I'd paid. "I imagine it's appreciated some." "Some?" Marcus let out a laugh that held no humor. "Mom, you're sitting on a paper profit of almost $80,000. But you structured the deal so we could buy it from you at your cost." The numbers made my head spin. I'd known the house was gaining value, but I hadn't realized how much. "I didn't buy it as an investment, Marcus. I bought it to help you." "That's exactly my point. You sacrificed your financial security, your home equity, everything to save us. And my wife spent Sunday afternoon calling you a parasite." The word hit me like a slap. I hadn't thought of it in those terms, but that's essentially what Natalie had called me. A parasite feeding off their success. "What are you going to tell her?" I asked quietly. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know yet. Part of me wants to throw the lease agreement on the table and watch her face when she realizes what you've done for us. But another part of me—" "What?" "I'm afraid of what this says about us, Mom. About me especially. What kind of man lets his mother mortgage her home to save his marriage while his wife insults her at the dinner table? The pain in his voice broke my heart. You're a good man, Marcus. You're my son, and you were in trouble. That's all that mattered to me. But it should have mattered to me how she treated you. It should have mattered to me that she was completely wrong about who was supporting whom. His voice grew harder. And now I have to figure out how to live with a woman who could be that cruel to someone who was literally keeping us housed. I heard a door slam in the background, followed by Natalie's voice calling Marcus's name. She's home, he said quietly. I have to go, but Mom? Thank you. For everything. And I'm sorry. I'm so damn sorry for letting her talk to you that way. Marcus, wait. What are you going to do? But the line had already gone dead, leaving me alone with the weight of secrets finally shared and the terrifying uncertainty of what would happen next. I looked down at the scattered photographs on my coffee table, images of happier times when my biggest worry was whether Marcus would eat his vegetables or finish his homework. Now I'd bought him a house and possibly destroyed his marriage in the process. I picked up the photo of 10-year-old Marcus at his baseball game and traced his smiling face with my finger. I'd protected him then from scraped knees and bullies. Now I was protecting him from financial ruin and public humiliation. But the enemies were more dangerous and the stakes infinitely higher. The phone rang again, and for a moment I thought it might be Marcus calling back. But it was an unknown number, so I let it go to voicemail. I had enough complications in my life without adding telemarketers to the mix. What I didn't know was that in 30 minutes, that missed call would be the least of my problems. Because Natalie had just walked into their house to find Marcus sitting at the kitchen table, staring at a lease agreement that would change everything she thought she knew about our family. And she was about to discover that the woman she'd called a burden had been carrying them all along. The call came at 11:47 that night. I'd been lying in bed, staring at the ceiling and replaying my conversation with Marcus, when my phone lit up the darkness. His name on the screen sent ice through my veins. Marcus. I answered, my voice hoarse with sleep and worry. Mom. He sounded exhausted, defeated. We need to talk. In the background I could hear Natalie's voice, sharp and angry, though I couldn't make out the words. There was a door slam, then sudden quiet. What happened? I told her. About the house, about everything. Marcus's voice was flat, emotionless. It went about as well as you'd expect. My heart sank. How angry is she? A bitter laugh escaped him. Angry doesn't begin to cover it. She's saying things, Mom. Terrible things. About me. About both of us. But mostly about you. His voice dropped to a whisper. She's calling it manipulation. She says you deliberately kept the truth from her to make her look bad. I sat up in bed, reaching for the lamp. The sudden light hurt my eyes, but I needed to be fully awake for this conversation. That's not why I did it, Marcus. You know that. I know. But she's not thinking rationally right now. She feels humiliated, and when Natalie feels humiliated, she strikes back. As if summoned by her name, I heard Natalie's voice getting closer, clearer. Is that her? Are you talking to your manipulative mother right now? Natalie, please. No, Marcus. Put her on speaker. I want to talk to her myself. My stomach clenched with dread. Marcus, maybe this isn't the right time. Mom's on the phone. I heard him tell her. Good. Because I have some things to say to her. The phone crackled as Marcus put me on speaker, and suddenly Natalie's voice filled the space between us, crystal clear and venomous. Well, well, well. The generous benefactor herself. Did you have a good laugh, Bonnie? Watching me call you a burden while you were secretly playing puppet master with our lives. Natalie, that's not how it was. Don't you dare lie to me anymore. Her voice was shrill now, all pretense of civility gone. You bought our house out from under us and didn't tell me. You let me humiliate myself at Sunday dinner while you sat there playing the victim. I gripped the phone tighter. I was trying to help. Marcus was desperate. Marcus was handling it. We would have figured something out without your interference. We were 3 months behind on rent, Marcus interjected quietly. We had a week before eviction. We could have moved somewhere cheaper. We could have asked my parents for help. We had options that didn't involve your mother buying us like we were some charity case. The pain in her voice was real, and despite everything, I felt a stab of sympathy. I remembered what it was like to be young and proud, to want to solve your own problems without admitting weakness. I never thought of you as charity, I said softly. I thought of you as family. Family doesn't lie, Bonnie. Family doesn't manipulate and scheme and keep secrets. Her voice grew colder with each word. But then again, I'm starting to think manipulation runs in your bloodline. That's enough, Marcus said sharply. Is it? Because I'm just getting started. I could hear her pacing now, her heels clicking against their hardwood floors. Do you know what this looks like to me, Bonnie? It looks like a lonely old woman who bought herself a son and daughter-in-law because she couldn't stand being alone. The words hit me like physical blows. That's not true. Isn't it? You used your money to create a situation where Marcus would feel guilty and obligated to you. You made yourself indispensable so he could never cut you out of his life. I was helping him save his marriage, I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. You would have left him if you'd known how bad the financial situation was. The silence that followed was deafening. I realized immediately that I'd said too much, revealed a truth that Marcus had probably never shared with his wife. What did you just say? Natalie's voice was deadly quiet. Natalie, Marcus started. No, I want to hear this. What did she mean about me leaving you? I closed my eyes, wishing I could take the words back. But the damage was done. Marcus's voice was barely audible. I was scared. You'd always talked about wanting financial stability, about not wanting to struggle like your parents did. When I lost my job and we started falling behind, I was terrified you'd see me as a failure. So you both decided to lie to me instead. We were protecting you, I said desperately, and protecting your marriage. By treating me like a child who couldn't handle the truth, Natalie's voice cracked with hurt and fury. By making decisions about my life without consulting me? She had a point and I knew it. We had treated her like she was too fragile or too shallow to handle their financial crisis. In our attempts to protect her, we'd stripped away her agency and her right to make informed decisions about her own life. You're right, I admitted. We should have trusted you with the truth. Don't. Her voice was sharp as broken glass. Don't you dare try to apologize your way out of this. You don't get to play the reasonable one now. Natalie, please, Marcus pleaded. Mom was just trying to help. Help. She let out a laugh that held no humor. She was trying to control. Don't you see it, Marcus? She created a situation where you owe her everything, where you can never truly be independent, because she holds the mortgage on your life. That's not what I wanted, I said, but even as the words left my mouth, I wondered if there was some truth to what she was saying. Had I secretly enjoyed being needed? Had some part of me liked knowing that Marcus depended on me? Maybe not consciously, Natalie continued, her voice gaining strength as she built her argument. But think about it, Marcus. Your mother has been alone since your father died 7 years ago. No husband, no social life to speak of, no hobbies or interests outside of you. Is it really so hard to believe that she might have subconsciously engineered a situation where you'd need her? Stop it, Marcus said, but his voice lacked conviction. She mortgaged her own home to buy ours, Marcus. Who does that unless they're getting something out of it? And what she got was guaranteed access to our lives, guaranteed gratitude, guaranteed dependence. I felt tears sliding down my cheeks as Natalie dissected my motivations with surgical precision. The worst part was that I couldn't entirely deny what she was saying. Yes, I'd helped because I loved Marcus and wanted to protect him. But had there also been a selfish component? Had I enjoyed feeling needed and important in a way I hadn't since my husband died? I just wanted to help my son, I whispered. No, you wanted to own your son. And now you do. Natalie's voice was final, certain. You own his house, his gratitude, his guilt, his future. Congratulations, Bonnie. You got exactly what you wanted. The line went quiet except for the sound of someone crying. It took me a moment to realize it was me. Mom. Marcus's voice was gentle, concerned. I think I should go. I managed through my tears. Mom, wait. But I was already hanging up, unable to bear hearing any more. I sat in my darkened bedroom, phone clutched in my shaking hands, and wondered if Natalie was right. Had I manipulated the situation to make myself indispensable? Had my love for Marcus twisted into something possessive and controlling without me realizing it? Outside my window, the city lights blurred through my tears. I thought about my late husband, David, and wondered what he would think of what I'd done. Would he see it as a mother's love or a widow's desperation? I didn't have long to wonder, because in the morning, I would discover that Natalie hadn't finished with me yet. She was about to launch a campaign that would turn my entire family against me, painting me as a manipulative puppet master who'd bought her son's loyalty and destroyed her marriage. And the most terrifying part was that I was starting to believe she might be right. The first text came from my sister Ruth at 7:30 in the morning. I was sitting at my small kitchen table, nursing my second cup of coffee and trying to convince myself to eat something, when my phone buzzed. "Bonnie, I just got off the phone with Natalie. We need to talk." My hands started shaking before I'd even finished reading. Ruth lived 3 states away and rarely called unless someone had died. For Natalie to have contacted her meant only one thing. She was building a case against me, recruiting allies for a war I didn't even know I was fighting. The phone rang before I could decide whether to respond to the text. "Ruth." I answered, my voice already defensive. "Bonnie Elizabeth Morrison, what in God's name have you done?" The use of my full name, the same tone Ruth had used when we were children and I'd broken something valuable, made me feel instantly small and guilty. "What did Natalie tell you?" "She told me you've been secretly controlling Marcus's life. That you bought his house without telling his wife and have been manipulating their marriage." Ruth's voice was sharp with disapproval. "Please tell me this isn't true." I closed my eyes, feeling the walls closing in. "It's not that simple, Ruth. It's a yes or no question, Bonnie. Did you buy Marcus's house without telling Natalie?" "Yes, but..." "Jesus Christ." Ruth cut me off. "What were you thinking?" "I was thinking my son was about to be evicted, and his wife didn't know how bad their financial situation was. I was thinking I could help without causing them to lose face." "By lying to her?" "By protecting their marriage." The words sounded weak even to me. Ruth was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was gentler but still concerned. "Bonnie, honey, I know you've been lonely since David died. We all understand that. But you can't buy your way into your son's life." There it was again, the same accusation Natalie had made. That I was a lonely widow trying to purchase relevance and importance through financial manipulation. That's not what I was doing. Isn't it? Because from the outside, it looks like you created a situation where Marcus would be dependent on you, where he'd have to include you in major life decisions because you literally own his home. My coffee had gone cold, but I took a sip anyway, buying time while I tried to find words to defend myself. But how could I defend something I was no longer certain was defensible? "Ruth, he was desperate. You didn't see him that day when he came to me, crying because he thought he was going to lose everything. I had the means to help, so I helped." "By keeping his wife in the dark?" "Bonnie, that woman has been living in a house for 8 months not knowing that her mother-in-law was secretly her landlord. Can you imagine how betrayed she feels?" I could imagine it, actually. That was the problem. I was starting to see the situation through Natalie's eyes, and the view was ugly. The phone rang again before Ruth and I finished our conversation. Marcus's name appeared on the screen, and my heart jumped. "Ruth, I need to take this. It's Marcus. Think about what I said, Bonnie, and maybe consider talking to someone, a counselor or therapist. This kind of behavior, it's not healthy." She hung up before I could respond, leaving me staring at Marcus's name on my still ringing phone. I answered just before it went to voicemail. "Hi, sweetheart. Mom, we have a problem." His voice was tight with stress. "Natalie's been making calls all morning. To Ruth, to cousin Barbara, to my Aunt Jennifer on Dad's side. She's telling everyone about the house situation." My stomach dropped. What exactly is she telling them? Her version of events. That you've been secretly controlling our lives. That you manipulated me into dependence. That you destroyed our marriage with your interference. He paused. "She's painting you as this calculating woman who used money to buy control over our family. And what are you telling people?" The silence stretched too long. "I don't know what to tell them, Mom." As I'm starting to wonder. "Why didn't you just give me the money? Why did you have to buy the house yourself and keep it secret?" The question I'd been dreading. The one I didn't have a good answer for. "I thought this way would preserve your dignity. If I'd just given you money for rent, you would have felt like you were taking charity from your mother." This way you could feel like you were handling things yourself. But that's just it, Mom. I wasn't handling things myself. I was never handling things myself. You were handling them for me. Just letting me pretend I had control. His words cut deep because they were true. I had robbed him of the chance to actually solve his problems, to grow stronger through adversity, to prove to himself and his wife that he could overcome challenges. I was trying to protect you. From what? From failure? From having to admit to my wife that I'd lost my job and burned through our savings? From having to face the consequences of my own mistakes? From losing the woman you love because of circumstances beyond your control? But don't you see? By not telling her, by making this decision for her, we took away her choice. We decided she was too shallow or too selfish to handle the truth. And maybe we were wrong about her. I thought about Natalie's fury the night before. The genuine hurt in her voice when she realized how we'd deceived her. Maybe she would have surprised us. Maybe she would have stood by Marcus through their financial crisis, found ways to cut expenses, even taken a second job to help. We'd never given her the chance to prove what kind of wife she really was. What does she want now? I asked quietly. She wants you out of our lives. Completely. Marcus's voice was barely audible. She says she can't trust either of us anymore, but especially you. She thinks as long as you own our house, you'll always have leverage over our marriage. And what do you want? Another long pause. I want my wife back. I want to fix what we broke. And I'm starting to think that might mean. He didn't finish the sentence, but he didn't need to. The message was clear. You want me to sell you the house. Mom, It's okay, Marcus. I understand. And I did, even though it felt like my heart was being torn from my chest. I'll call the real estate lawyer who handled the purchase. We can transfer ownership to you and Natalie. At current market value? I almost laughed at the question. Even now, even after everything, he was still trying to protect me from financial loss. At what I paid for it. The original agreement stands. Mom, that's not fair to you. The house has appreciated. I didn't buy it as an investment, remember? I bought it to help my son. Consider the appreciation my wedding gift to you and Natalie. I could hear him crying softly on the other end of the line. I'm so sorry, Mom, for all of this, for letting it get this far. Don't apologize for loving your wife. That's what I wanted for you. Someone who would fight for your marriage. Even if it means choosing her over you? The question hung in the air between us like smoke from a fire that had already consumed everything we'd built together. Especially then, I whispered. After we hung up, I sat in my kitchen for a long time, watching the morning sun creep across my small table. I thought about David and the advice he used to give Marcus when he was young. Sometimes being a man means making hard choices. Sometimes it means letting go of something you love to save something you love more. I'd never imagined I would be the thing he had to let go of. The phone rang again, Barbara this time, then Jennifer, then two cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. All calling with the same concerned tone, all repeating variations of Natalie's story. By noon I'd stopped answering calls altogether. Natalie's campaign was working. She was systematically turning my family against me. And the most devastating part was that she didn't even have to lie. The truth was damning enough. I'd bought my son's house in secret. I'd kept his wife in the dark about their financial situation. I'd made myself indispensable to their survival. When laid out in stark terms, it did sound manipulative and controlling. But as I sat alone in my apartment, surrounded by the deafening silence of a ringing phone I refused to answer, I held on to one truth that Natalie couldn't twist or reframe. I had acted out of love. Misguided love, perhaps. Overprotective love that had crossed boundaries it shouldn't have crossed. But love nonetheless. The question now was whether love would be enough to rebuild what I'd helped destroy, or if some damage was simply too extensive to repair. Tomorrow, I would sign papers transferring ownership of the house to Marcus and Natalie. I would give up my financial hold over their lives and hope that in doing so, I might someday earn back my place in their hearts. But tonight, I grieved for the relationship I tried so hard to protect that I'd ended up destroying it instead. The lawyer's office smelled like leather and disappointment. I sat across from Robert Chen, the same attorney who'd helped me purchase the house 8 months earlier, watching him review documents that would officially end my involvement in my son's life. Mrs. Morrison, I need to make sure you understand what you're signing, he said, his voice gentle but professional. You're transferring full ownership of the property at 15 Oak Street to your son and daughter-in-law for the original purchase price of $230,000. The current market value is approximately $310,000. You're essentially gifting them $80,000 in equity. I understand. There's also the matter of the lease clause you insisted on when we structured the original purchase. He pulled out a thick folder and opened it to a page marked with yellow sticky notes. Do you remember the provision we discussed? My heart skipped a beat. In all the emotional chaos of the past few days, I'd forgotten about that particular detail. Refresh my memory. You insisted on a clause that would allow you to reclaim the property if certain conditions were met. Specifically, if the primary resident showed demonstrable disrespect or cruelty toward the benefactor. At the time, you said you wanted protection against potential abuse. The memory came flooding back. I'd been sitting in this same chair 8 months ago, still reeling from Marcus's desperate plea for help, when Robert had suggested the protective clause. I'd agreed to it almost absently, never imagining I'd need it. What exactly does that mean in legal terms? Robert adjusted his glasses and read directly from the document. If Mrs. Morrison can demonstrate through witness testimony, recorded evidence, or documented incidents that she has been subjected to verbal abuse, public humiliation, or systematic exclusion by the property residents, she retains the right to revoke the sale and reclaim full ownership. My hands trembled as the implications sank in. Sunday's dinner. Natalie's cruel words, spoken in front of Marcus and Chelsea. The systematic campaign to turn my family against me. All of it documented in my phone records, witnessed by others. I thought you'd forgotten about this clause, Robert continued. Do you want me to remove it before we finalize the transfer? I stared at the paper spread across his mahogany desk. One signature would give Marcus and Natalie their independence, their dignity, their fresh start. It would also cost me $80,000 and leave me with nothing but a reverse mortgage on my own home. Mrs. Morrison? What would happen if I invoked the clause? Robert's eyebrows rose slightly. You'd regain full ownership of the property. The residents would have 30 days to vacate or begin paying market rate rent directly to you. Given that they've been current on payments through the management company, they'd likely qualify as tenants, but you'd be under no obligation to renew their lease. And the money they've paid in rent would be credited as partial payment toward the purchase price, should they choose to buy the property again at current market value. $310,000. Almost $100,000 more than what they thought they were paying me. I need a moment to think. Robert nodded and stepped out of the office, leaving me alone with the weight of an impossible decision. I could sign the papers and let them go, sacrificing my financial security for the slim hope that Marcus might someday forgive me. Or I could exercise a clause I'd forgotten existed and reclaim control of the situation. My phone buzzed with a text from Ruth. Bonnie, I just talked to Jennifer. She says Natalie called her this morning with more stories about your manipulation. This needs to stop. More stories. Natalie wasn't content with turning my immediate family against me. She was systematically destroying my reputation with every relative we had. I scrolled through my missed calls from the past 2 days. Cousin Barbara, Uncle Thomas, 3 family friends I hadn't heard from in years, all wanting to discuss the situation with Marcus. Another text, this one from Marcus. Mom, Natalie wants to know when you'll have the transfer papers ready. She's already looking at furniture for the house since she'll finally feel comfortable decorating knowing it's really ours. The casual cruelty of it hit me like a physical blow. Natalie was already celebrating my defeat, already planning how to erase my presence from their lives. She was looking at furniture, probably expensive pieces that would replace anything that reminded her of me. I thought about my father's recliner, the one I'd given Marcus when David died. Would that be the first thing to go? The family photos on their mantelpiece, would those disappear too? Every trace of me systematically removed until it was as if I'd never existed in their lives at all. Robert knocked and re-entered. Have you decided? I looked at him, this kind man who'd helped me structure a deal that was supposed to protect my son, but had somehow turned into a weapon against me. Tell me more about invoking the clause. What kind of evidence would I need? Well, you mentioned there were witnesses to verbal abuse. If you have documentation of a pattern of disrespectful behavior, particularly behavior that occurred after the property transfer was arranged. He consulted his notes. The clause is actually quite broad. It was designed to protect elderly parents from adult children who might take advantage of their generosity. Which is exactly what's happening. Is it? Robert's voice was carefully neutral. Because from what you've told me, your son seems caught in the middle. The primary issue appears to be with your daughter-in-law. He was right. Marcus was weak, not cruel. Manipulated, not manipulative. But Natalie had deliberately humiliated me in front of witnesses, launched a campaign to isolate me from my family, and was now celebrating what she saw as her victory over the old woman who dared to help her husband. If I invoke the clause, what happens to Marcus? He'd be caught between his mother and his wife. Again. Robert's expression was sympathetic. Mrs. Morrison, may I speak frankly? I nodded. I've been practicing family law for 23 years. I've seen situations like this before. Adult children caught between spouses and parents, everyone claiming to act out of love while inflicting maximum damage on each other. He leaned forward slightly. The clause exists for a reason. It protects people like you from being taken advantage of by ungrateful recipients of your generosity. But using it would destroy Marcus's marriage. His marriage might already be destroyed. From what you've described, your daughter-in-law's true character has been revealed. She's shown herself to be someone who responds to generosity with cruelty, who builds herself up by tearing others down. Is that really the kind of person your son should be married to? I thought about Natalie's face on Sunday, the gleam of satisfaction in her eyes as she'd called me a burden. The calculated way she turned my kindness into evidence of manipulation. The systematic campaign to poison my family against me. What would you do? If it were your mother? Robert was quiet for a long moment. My mother sacrificed everything to put me through law school. Worked 2 jobs, lived in a studio apartment, ate ramen noodles for dinner most nights. If someone had treated her the way your daughter-in-law treated you. He shook his head. Some people don't deserve the gift of family. I picked up the pen, my hand surprisingly steady. But instead of signing the transfer papers, I reached for a blank sheet of letterhead. I want to invoke the clause. Robert's eyebrows rose. Are you certain? Once we start this process, there's no going back. Your relationship with your son is already damaged beyond repair. Natalie made sure of that. I met his eyes. At least this way, I don't lose everything I worked for to someone who sees kindness as weakness and generosity as manipulation. As I began writing the formal notice, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months: power. For too long I'd been reacting to other people's choices, accepting their judgments, allowing them to define my worth. But I'd forgotten something crucial. I wasn't just Marcus's mother. I was Bonnie Morrison, a woman who'd worked 2 jobs to put herself through nursing school, who'd built a marriage that lasted 35 years, who'd raised a son to be kind and generous even when those qualities were turned against him. And I owned the house they'd been living in for 8 months, thinking they were independent when they were actually dependent on the woman they decided to destroy. The letter was brief and professional. Notice of contract revocation under Section 7 of Purchase Agreement. Effective immediately, I am exercising my right to reclaim full ownership of the property at 15 Oak Street, due to demonstrated disrespect and verbal abuse by resident Natalie Williams Morrison. I'll need to file this with the county recorder's office, Robert said as he reviewed my letter. And I'll send certified copies to both Marcus and Natalie. They'll have 30 days to either vacate the premises or negotiate a rental agreement at current market rates. Current market rates for a house like theirs would be around $2,800 a month. They'd been paying $1,800 through the management company, and even that had been a struggle. Robert, I want you to add something to the notice. What's that? I want them to know that this decision was made specifically because of Natalie's behavior on Sunday, November 12th, when she publicly humiliated me in front of witnesses, calling me a burden and claiming I was dependent on them while I was literally paying their rent. I paused, feeling the weight of what I was about to say. And I want them to know that her subsequent campaign to turn my family against me only reinforced my decision. As Robert made notes, I felt a strange sense of peace settling over me. I wasn't acting out of anger or revenge. I was acting out of self-preservation. I was refusing to be destroyed by someone who'd mistaken my kindness for weakness. The papers were filed within 2 hours. By 5 o'clock that evening, Marcus and Natalie would receive certified letters that would change everything they thought they knew about their secure, independent life. And for the first time in months, I was the one who held all the cards. The phone started ringing at 6:15 that evening. I was in my kitchen, making myself a proper dinner for the first time in weeks. Salmon with roasted vegetables, the kind of meal I'd stopped bothering with when depression had settled over me like a heavy blanket. Marcus's name flashed on the screen. I let it ring. It rang again immediately. Then again. By the fourth call, I turned the volume off and focused on my dinner. I'd spent months jumping every time my family called, dropping everything to accommodate their needs and emotions. Tonight I was going to eat a civilized meal at my own pace. The salmon was perfectly flaked, the vegetables tender. I ate slowly, tasting each bite, savoring the simple pleasure of a well-prepared meal. Through my kitchen window, I could see the city lights beginning to twinkle as dusk settled over the neighborhood. It was peaceful in a way I'd forgotten was possible. My doorbell rang at 7:30. Then again. Then someone started knocking hard, desperate knocks that echoed through my small apartment. Mom! Mom, I know you're in there. Marcus's voice was muffled by the door but clearly audible. Please, we need to talk. I finished loading my dishwasher before walking to the door. Through the peephole, I could see Marcus standing alone in the hallway, his hair disheveled, his face red with emotion. Mom, please. Open the door. I turned the deadbolt and opened the door, but left the chain latch engaged so it would only open a few inches. Hello, Marcus. What the hell did you do? His voice cracked with emotion. The lawyer's letter. Mom, what are you doing? I'm protecting myself. Something I should have done months ago. By taking our house? By threatening to make us homeless. I studied his face through the narrow gap. The same face I'd kissed goodnight for 18 years. The same eyes that had looked at me with love and trust for most of his life. But there was something different now. A hardness that reminded me uncomfortably of his wife. It was never your house, Marcus. It was always mine. I just let you live in it while you got back on your feet. But the transfer papers were contingent on respectful treatment. Your wife violated those terms quite spectacularly. Marcus pressed his face closer to the door crack. Mom, she's sorry. She was upset, she didn't mean. Where is she now? He hesitated. She's packing. Packing. She thinks we should leave tonight. She says she won't live in a house where she can be thrown out on a whim by a vindictive old woman. The word stung, but I kept my expression neutral. Is that what you think I am? A vindictive old woman? I don't know what to think anymore. His voice broke. I don't understand what happened to us. We used to be close. You used to be kind and generous and loving. Now you're this. Now I'm what, Marcus? Cold. Calculating. Using money as a weapon. I almost laughed at the irony. I'm using money as a weapon? Marcus, I gave you $80,000 in equity as a gift. I mortgaged my own home to save yours. I spent 6 months paying your rent while your wife called me a burden. And now that I've stopped allowing myself to be abused, I'm the one who's cold and calculating. But taking the house back is my legal right. A right I included specifically to protect myself from this exact situation. I leaned closer to the door crack. Tell me something, Marcus. When Natalie was humiliating me at Sunday dinner, why didn't you stop her? I was shocked. I didn't know how to. You didn't know how to defend your mother? The woman who raised you, who sacrificed for you, who literally saved your marriage by buying your house. My voice grew stronger. You sat there and let her call me a burden while I was paying your bills. You let her accuse me of being dependent on you while I was supporting you. You chose her cruelty over my dignity. Marcus was crying now, tears sliding down his cheeks. I'm sorry, Mom. I know I should have defended you. I know I was wrong. And afterward? When you realized the truth about who was really supporting whom, did you tell her she owed me an apology? I tried, but she said. What did she say, Marcus? She said you had manipulated the situation to make her look bad. That you probably planned it all along to create drama and make yourself look like the victim. I closed my eyes, feeling the last threads of hope snap. And you believed her. I didn't know what to believe. But Mom, she's my wife. I have to try to save my marriage. By sacrificing your mother? By choosing the woman I'm committed to spending my life with over the woman who raised me to be independent, and then made it impossible for me to actually be independent. The accusation hung in the air between us. Marcus believed what Natalie had told him, that I'd manipulated the situation, that I'd created dependence to serve my own emotional needs. You want independence, Marcus? You've got it. You have 30 days to find somewhere else to live, or you can pay market rent to continue living in my house. Either way, you'll finally get what you claim you want. No more help from manipulative old me. Mom, please. Don't do this. We'll lose everything. You'll lose the house I was giving you as a gift. The house your wife was already redecorating, because she was so excited to finally own something that was really yours. I paused. Tell me, what did she say when she realized you'd never actually owned it? When she realized she'd been living in my house while calling me a parasite? Marcus's face crumpled. She said she felt humiliated, betrayed. She said we could never have a real marriage as long as you had financial control over our lives. And now she doesn't have to worry about that anymore. You can build your real marriage somewhere else, with money you earn yourselves, in a home you can actually afford. We can't afford anything else. Not in this market, not with my salary. Then maybe you should have thought about that before you let your wife systematically destroy the woman who was making your lifestyle possible. I started to close the door, but Marcus pushed against it, his fingers gripping the edge. Mom, wait. What if Natalie apologized? What if she came here right now and apologized for everything she said? I considered this. Marcus, do you really think Natalie is sorry? Or do you think she's just sorry she got caught being cruel to someone who was helping her? He was quiet for a long moment. I think she's sorry about the consequences. Exactly. She's not sorry she hurt me. She's sorry it turned out I had the power to hurt her back. I gently pulled his fingers away from the door. That's not the foundation for forgiveness, sweetheart. That's just fear. So what happens now? Now you figure out how to be the independent man you've always claimed you wanted to be. You find housing you can afford, you live within your means, you build a marriage based on honesty instead of secrets. I paused. And maybe someday, when you've learned to set boundaries with your wife the way I finally learned to set boundaries with both of you, we can have a relationship again. And if we can't afford to stay in the city, then you move somewhere you can afford. People do it every day, Marcus. They make hard choices and sacrifices and they survive. They even thrive sometimes. Marcus stepped back from the door. His shoulders slumped in defeat. I never wanted it to come to this. Neither did I. But here we are. What if I choose you over her? What if I leave Natalie and we go back to the way things were? The question I've been secretly hoping for and simultaneously dreading. Marcus, if you're only choosing me because I own your house, then you're not really choosing me at all. You're just choosing the path of least resistance again. That's not. Go home to your wife. Pack your things. Figure out your life together without my interference. I softened my voice slightly. I love you, Marcus. I always will. But I won't be anyone's backup plan or safety net anymore. I won't be taken for granted or treated like a burden while I'm solving everyone's problems. Mom. Goodbye, sweetheart. I closed the door and turned the deadbolt, then slid down against it until I was sitting on my hallway floor. I could hear Marcus crying on the other side. Could hear him saying my name over and over. But I didn't open the door. After 20 minutes, his footsteps finally faded down the hallway. 3 days later, I received an envelope slipped under my door. Inside was a handwritten note from Natalie. Not an apology, but a bill. She'd itemized every improvement she'd made to the house over the past 8 months. New curtains, fresh paint, garden plants, cabinet hardware. The total came to $4,067, which she expected me to reimburse since I was stealing their home. I called Robert Chen and had him add the note to our file as evidence of continued harassment. Then I threw it away and made myself a cup of tea. 2 weeks later, Marcus and Natalie moved out. I watched from my car as they loaded a rented truck with their belongings, both of them grim-faced and silent. Marcus looked toward my building once, as if hoping to see me in the window, but I stayed hidden behind my curtains. They'd found a 2-bedroom apartment in a less expensive part of town. Marcus had taken a second job driving for a ride-sharing service on weekends. They were learning to live within their actual means for the first time in their marriage. I decided not to rent out the house immediately. Instead, I had it professionally cleaned and updated, fresh paint throughout, new fixtures, refinished hardwood floors. The transformation was remarkable. With Natalie's dark, heavy decorating style removed, the house felt bright and welcoming again. 6 months later, I moved in myself. I sold my apartment and used the proceeds to pay down the reverse mortgage on my original condo, which I then rented out to a lovely retired teacher named Helen. The income from that rental, combined with my pension and Social Security, meant I could live comfortably in the house I'd originally bought to save my son's marriage. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd ended up with exactly what Natalie had accused me of wanting all along: a beautiful home and financial security. The difference was that I'd earned it through decades of hard work and sacrifice, not manipulation and cruelty. Ruth called me 6 months after the eviction to tell me that Marcus and Natalie were getting divorced. Apparently, the stress of their reduced circumstances had revealed cracks in their relationship that couldn't be repaired. Natalie had filed papers citing irreconcilable differences, which Ruth said was code for, "He can't give me the lifestyle I want anymore." "She's already dating someone new," Ruth added. "A divorced executive with a house in the hills. Funny how quickly she got over her heartbreak." I felt sad for Marcus but not surprised. Natalie had shown her true character when their circumstances changed. She was the kind of person who loved a lifestyle more than a person, who valued appearances over loyalty. Marcus called me on my birthday. We talked for 20 minutes, carefully, politely, like distant relatives catching up. He told me about his new apartment, his promotion at work, his plans to take a vacation to Europe he'd been saving for. He sounded older, more mature, but also genuinely happier than he'd been in years. "Mom," he said near the end of our conversation, "I want you to know I understand now why you did what you did. With the house, I mean." "Do you?" "Natalie showed me who she really was when things got difficult. You were just the first person brave enough to stop enabling her." He paused. "I'm sorry it took me so long to see it. And I'm sorry I didn't defend you when I should have. I know you are, sweetheart. Do you think, could we maybe have dinner sometime? Just the two of us?" I looked around my beautiful living room, at the family photos I'd hung on the walls, at the bookshelf filled with novels I finally had time to read, at the garden visible through the window that I'd planted with my own hands. I'd like that very much. We made plans for the following Sunday. I would cook his favorite meal, pot roast with carrots and potatoes, the same recipe I'd made when he was 10 years old and thought I was the most wonderful woman in the world. Some relationships can be rebuilt, I've learned, but only after they're torn down to their foundation and reconstructed on a basis of mutual respect, rather than obligation or guilt. As I hung up the phone, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: complete peace. I was 66 years old, living in a beautiful home I owned outright, with enough money to live comfortably for the rest of my life. I had my dignity intact, my boundaries firmly established, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing I'd finally learned to choose myself. The woman who'd been called a burden was now completely self-sufficient. The woman who'd been accused of manipulation had simply stopped being manipulated. And the woman who'd been told she was dependent had discovered that the only person she truly needed was herself. It was the most liberating feeling in the world.